Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Merrimack School Board for January 2nd, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting to order and start, as we often do, with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and we welcome everybody back after a wonderful holiday break. We hope it was wonderful for all of our families and people listening at home as well. We're going to start our meeting tonight as we do with our public participation segment. If you wish to speak, we'd ask that you please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. And if you are a student, there is no need to state your address, just your name. So we now open the microphone to public participation.
The work? Am I on?
You're on.
Okay. My name is S.J. Torres. I live at 10 Brienne Drive in Merrimack. I own Tomahawk down the street. My kid plays quarterback for the high school freshman team. We're here requesting help with the scoreboard. Last year, the scoreboard didn't work 3/4 of the season, maybe more. There was a situation I remember at the end of the game. Game's over. The ref's saying the game's over. The kids on the field don't realize it's over. My kid's cutting up the field, taking extra hits. That really unnecessary if we had a proper working scoreboard. When the time expires, and everyone knows. Pretty scary situation. Don't want the kids to get hurt. We're a Division I program in the state. Kip, our head coach, sends more kids to college to play football than any high school in the state. It's pretty embarrassing that we have no scoreboard. So we got a group of people together to raise money. Tomahawk's already written $2,000. We'll write another $2,000 in the spring, another $2,000 in the fall. We have other people that are willing to help write checks. We're here to ask for help from the town because the scoreboard we want to put up, we want it to be really, really nice. Has some video on it so we can have advertisers on there to help the high school program. Last week, one of the parents of one of the best receivers to ever come through this town took their kid to Bishop Girton for a walkthrough. I heard about it. We talked to Kip. Kip intercepted the parents and met with them, and the kid's staying. We just can't be like that. Bedford has 10 scoreboards. They got 10 fields. We just need one. And it's not just the football team. A lot of people use that field, and there's no scoreboard. But thank you for your time. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help. I know a lot of people in town. These events, these football games and all the games, they're community events. The whole town goes to them. If we get a good enough scoreboard, guys, we can even help the kids into school. Maybe we can elevate have a broadcasting program where we got video stuff on the board. We can use that video to put into maybe a sports program that the kids are asking the questions they're putting on it. Maybe we put it on Merrimack TV, and we can elevate the school and have a good program. I got all my friends work for ESPN. They're all retiring because I'm old. But they'll call in once a month, Zoom in these classrooms. I can really help. But I need your help. Thank you for the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck Mower, 4 Depot Street. If I may have a point of privilege. SJ, I think you might want to come and make some kind of presentation to the Budget Committee. We have a meeting tomorrow night. And spread the word amongst the people that deal with budgets and so forth. And it also sounds to me like an excellent opportunity for an ELO. So we might want to see if we could coordinate with the ELO director on this project. I think it would be very useful for students that normally aren't necessarily seeking an ELO, but they could learn a great deal from this process of fundraising and identifying equipment and acquiring it and so forth. It's a complicated process. So I think we should have an interest in participating more fully with that. Thank you for the point of privilege, Mr. Chairman. My coming here tonight is really not about the Budget Committee. I will have a sufficient amount of time to go over the budget and debate it with my fellow committee members. I'm actually looking forward to having the ability to debate with my colleagues as opposed to the last several years where I had to facilitate for the committee. And there's a big difference between facilitating a committee, as Ken, you know, and being on a committee. And so, yes, I will be looking at the budget in a lot of different ways. And I must say, I have a piqued interest this year for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that this is the year that we're going to propose some kind of SAU construction project. And I think the quicker we can get something like that off the ground and going, the better off we are. After all, April is not that far away. But my primary reason in coming here this evening is that as a citizen in Merrimack, if I could propose to you a way to save $500,000 and perhaps a more efficient delivery of services on the part of the broad curriculum, it would be by encouraging you to adopt a 4x4 block scheduling. I think that would do a lot of things for us. It would make full use of the staff that we have and perhaps extract more value from them than we have previously asked in the past. I myself have taught for 12 years under a block scheduling program, and I can't say enough of the benefits of that type of thing. Now, you know, curriculums are wide and varied. I was a technical education deliverer. And I got to tell you, if you've got 55 minutes to do something in a technical ed class, you just lost probably about 30 of that, just getting everybody together, taking attendance, passing out pencils, answering stupid questions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you really want to be productive, you have to have a block of time that will allow true forward motion in any curriculum subject, as opposed to a short experience 5 days a week. I know its value. I believe in its value. As a citizen, I encourage you because it's going to save us money, a large sum of money. I know probably 96% of the budget is not discretionary. And so we're always wondering how many pencils we can stop using or how many paper clips we can save and all that sort of thing. But here is an opportunity through rescheduling to a 4x4 block to probably save at least $500,000 with no noticeable effect other than change. So I want to have you seriously consider that as a savings for our community. We have much to do. We have very little to do it with ultimately over the next few years. And here's an opportunity for a big chunk of money to be saved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sure.
Ken, may I ask, while you're here, if people want to send in a donation to, what is the address? Where do they send it?
We haven't really set that up yet, but okay, we'll work on it.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll let Lori know. Thank you
all
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Thank you. And if there is no one else, we will close public participation for tonight and move on to our budget presentations. And before we hear from our first presentation tonight, I did just want to take a minute, now that myself and my fellow board members have had a chance to really sit and digest the budget for a while now. We've definitely had an opportunity to kind of dig into it a little bit and sort of reflect on the presentations from last meeting. And we want to let the folks at home know that we hear concerns. We hear your concerns when it comes to this current budget cycle. As many people in our town know, taxes went up quite a bit. And thanks to the lovely bill that we get in the mail with those colorful little pie charts on there, it can be deceiving and easy to kind of place that blame for that increase on the schools. We are a huge organization and we require a lot of funding in order to do the bare minimum of what we are able to do. So I understand why that frustration exists. However, I think it's worth noting that we cannot and will not take full responsibility for that full increase because it is not all as a result of what got passed last year. We proposed a budget last year that provided an increase of about 1.4%, which is not going to make your taxes go up $800 to $1,000. The town of Merrimack lost $74 million in industrial property tax funding, if I have that term correct, which has affected private property tax rates. We've also lost $1 million in state funding for our schools. So we've lost a lot of money that usually helps offset that cost. So as we look at the budget numbers and as we start to examine them, right now, from my personal experience, I am concerned with the budget numbers as they stand right now, and hearing the conversations that happen in our town about that concern. I was registering my car at the DMV or at town hall the other day, and 3 total strangers who clearly didn't know who I was were standing there having a conversation about the school and their taxes and how upset they were. And if that's a random occurrence, I am sure these conversations are happening all over town, as they should be. So as I know myself and I know the other board members up here, as we go through these numbers, we want everybody to know that we are doing everything we can to make sure we do right by our community while still providing the best possible education we can for our students. One thing I think is worth mentioning, at the end of every budget cycle, we have to give our surplus back to the town. We always provide, and we always make an effort to have a surplus that we give back to the town of Merrimack. Currently, the town is sitting on an $8.2 million surplus. Maybe that would be something that we could talk to them about maybe offsetting some of these costs that we're proposing this year. So I just wanted to put that out there before we got into even more. We've only had one set of presentations so far, and as we get into some additional presentations and a few more next week, I know that conversations in town are happening about concerns over the budget that are very much warranted and need to happen. And just know that as of right now, I am also a little worried about this budget, the way it stands. So, and I know I've talked to a few board members as well about that. And I think we're probably one of the most supportive, I don't want to say one of, because I don't know all the school boards, but I know we have an incredibly supportive school board on here that wants to see our school districts thrive and give them whatever they need to do that. We also have to understand that our community is hurting right now from those tax increases, and we just need to keep that in mind going forward. So just wanted to say that before we got into budget presentations.
May I
Yes, please.
respond to that also? We have a wonderful leadership team and a wonderful staff in this school district. We all take great pride in trying to provide the best education possible. And in the process of developing a budget, we first and foremost make every effort to understand the needs of children in this district. We have done that. We have constructed a budget that we feel meets the needs of students. But with that being said, between all of us, between myself and Amy and Matt and and others, we probably have 60 years, 70 years of experience, collective experience. We understand that we also have a responsibility, a very important responsibility, to the taxpayers in Merrimack. We are absolutely prepared to work with you and the Budget Committee. We understand that you are the representatives of the community. And if you're hearing great concerns, whether they're founded or not, and it's being aimed at the school district, and believe me, I've been there many, many years where I worked in a district for many years in Massachusetts that was, for several years, voted the best school district in Massachusetts, but we were also designated as the best bang for the buck of any school district in Massachusetts. And what I'm trying to say is we take it seriously. We take it seriously with our obligation to students. We take it seriously with our obligation to taxpayers. And so sometimes, and as you know, and I hope we've been earning the public's confidence in Merrimack in terms of demonstrating that we're trying to do the right thing for children, trying to bring a quality, and I mean a very high quality school district to the town where every child can flourish. But sometimes when we want to make a mile of change, maybe we settle for half a mile, okay, or somewhere in between. And so to you and to the taxpayers and to the Budget Committee, please know that we will always do our homework. We'll always represent our students and our staff to the best of our abilities, but we'll also represent the taxpayers to the best of our abilities also. So we've had a wonderful track record in the last couple of years of working collaboratively, and we'll continue with that and in the best interest of both parties.
Thank you, Bill. And I know I think the trust is there for sure. I've done this once before. This is my second time going through this, and I was really proud of the budget we went past last year. Taking a look at our major priorities this year, with the SAU office being a major priority and the MESA contract being a major priority, probably critical priorities. I would just say we keep that in mind as we continue these discussions going forward, that those are the two things that we're really focused on right now. So cool. All right. Any other, since we brought it up?
I just want to say again about the new central office. Like, this is not a want. This is a critical need for this school district. I think it's really important. And then, of course, the contract is also very critical. We need to understand that we have really hardworking people in the district, and we need to be competitive in how we pay them.
Yeah, go ahead, Lori. I already broke protocol, so go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to add to what both of you said. We have worked very hard as a team, both the board and central office. And one of the things that I really appreciate about our current administration is their willingness to work. There's not an adversarial relationship. There's a collaborative spirit. And I expressed some of my concerns as well about the budget and kind of the overall picture of what I would like to see us target as we move forward. And I appreciate the willingness to be heard and the willingness to work together and make any necessary changes to make this budget fit our needs, what we need to do right now versus what we want to do maybe next year, and what works with the taxpayers.
Go ahead, Jenna.
Well, and I just want to say, I echo everything everyone has said. And the truth of the matter is, two other things that are included in this budget that we have to remember. One is a giant win, which is this is the year 2 of our MTA contract that was passed by the voters, right? Giant win. That was a wonderful thing that the voters passed last year, and we're in year 2 of that, and that is an increase, right? There's an increase there. And also that guaranteed maximum rate, which is less yeehaw and a little bit more of a nothing we can do about it. And, so those are two factors that, we tend to forget about. Or I say we, we probably don't forget about it, but the people that are going to the voting booth are maybe not paying as close attention, or even the people that do, we don't maybe say those things enough. That guaranteed maximum rate, that's what we have to pay for the benefits for our staff. And those rates are, given to us by someone else, and then we have an obligation to fulfill those. And then again, the teacher's contract is a huge win because we do need to attract and retain the absolute best teachers, because excellent teachers are what make an excellent school district. So, within the confines of all of that and chasing after some of the big goals we have as a district, keeping all of those things in mind, making some really difficult decisions. But we're grateful for your cooperation with us in that process.
Go ahead, Naomi.
Since everyone else did. No, I wanted to say, I've been hearing things about the tax increase too. I heard it at the hairdresser last week, completely unrelated to anything. It just randomly came up. And so, I've been hearing it around too. So I want to echo what you said, Ken, about people knowing that we hear you, and that I was really proud of that budget we passed last year too. It did so much for so little. And I felt amazing about it. So then when I saw my tax bill, I was like, we did so much with so little. How did this happen? And so I'm glad that you guys talked to the town and have provided those explanations as well. One thing it's not as big of a big ticket item that you guys didn't mention that I would hopefully like to see preserved is the continuation of building the reading program, because that's so foundational. That's one of the things that's on my priority list of really want to see stay. So
I don't think anyone's interested in going backwards in that category. Okay, so now that I've sufficiently broken procedure, we can go continue. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for indulging me. We will begin tonight's budget. No pressure. We'll begin tonight's budget presentations from hearing Mr. Tom Tussaud and the maintenance budget.
Thank you. My name is Tom Tussaud. I'm the Director of Maintenance. I first would like to thank the school board and administration for letting me share my budget with you tonight. There's 4 areas that I'm going to highlight in this budget. One would be district-wide repair supply costs. The costs are going up across the board. I think everybody realizes that, and that's definitely in this budget. There's also an emergency retrofit lease cost for unit ventilators in this budget for the first time. We could talk a little bit more about that later. It's going to go roughly 10 years. Next item is district-wide AC split unit systems that we propose to put into our schools. And the last item is window repair at Mastacola Upper Elementary School. And I just started off that way, and I'd love to take questions if that's how you'd like to proceed.
Sure. Go ahead, Jenna.
Well, actually, I want to start with a comment. It's so funny because sometimes you have these ideas in your head through your experiences of what you think needs to be done. And then I never said anything there. So I went into the upper elementary school this fall because my daughter started there. And I'm not a noticer, but I did notice the windows. And I was like, those are not something. Those need help. And so and then I got busy and I never said anything. And then to see him in here, I was like, oh, this is why we love Tom and the great work that you do, because you pay attention to those things and the cycle of those things. And if you go into JMU's, those windows need to be replaced. So thank you for noticing that and putting that in there.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lori.
Tom, did you get my questions?
I got them about
Okay,
half
that's
hour
all right.
ago.
So here's my questions. I had questions about on page 6 where we're looking at the tractors and the mowers and all of the automobiles. And so I was just wanting to understand when we decide to fix something versus sell it and buy something new. How is the rotation? Because some of this is we have a tractor that's 1976. I guess maybe a tractor
Super old.
goes a long time, but that just seems like You know, I mean, I graduated in 1977, so, you know, it was here when I was here.
I was born in 1974.
So there you go. So,
Same age as me.
so I'm just trying to get how we
No,
determine.
if we can fix it and repair it, we will. If it hits the end of its life and we can't repair it, or someone says it's gonna cost you more to fix it than repair it, then we address it at that point. Normally trucks, when I'm talking about a plow truck, separate than the tractors and stuff like that, normally I'm figuring about 10 years or so. Sometimes it goes 15, but a lot of times, in the last case, it was rusted out, so we had to replace it. So we try to push it until the end, but yeah, that's exactly what we do. We'll push it right to the end. And the other vehicles, depending on how much we use them, some of them run really good. Just because they're old doesn't mean they don't work well. And other ones are at probably the end of its lifetime. Like the 20 is one of our tractors that are just really old and really is losing most of it. So that will be coming up. But at this point, it's also balanced with budget, as you know. We didn't feel its time as yet.
Well, and that's kind of like a thing in tractor culture, right? Is see how long you can make those things
Mhm.
last. Yeah. I'm not a farmer, but I know some. Other questions? I've got a few. Oh, go ahead, Lori. Sure.
So I had one more about just the air conditioners, like what schools they're going into. Is there going to be like a long-term plan for the air conditioners in all schools? And how do we come to the 12?
I think
Could
that's
Tom, just for a minute,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
no, absolutely.
This is your show. But I just want to mention that we did do a certain number of these every single year for a number of years, and then we had stopped. We put it on pause. So this is something that is new to you guys, but it's not new to the operating budget. So go ahead, Tom.
At this time, we're asking for 12, and we don't quite know where we're going to put them this year. It kind of works with the students that need them. So we kind of will look at next year just before, and we'll say which schools need them. Do we need 3 more at Reed's Ferry, or do we need 1 more at ME, or do we need 6 more at Thornton's Ferry? We don't quite know, but we're going to make that based on students' needs, and that's how we're going. Long term with air conditioning, though, I can actually ask Matt to talk about this, because Matt was one of the people or the person with the air conditioning at the middle school that come through Matt Chavanel.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So I think if we're looking at a large scale, I don't think it's efficient to do it with split systems. But when we're targeting certain students and certain programs, it makes sense for me. So
the problem with the buildings is the old high school, which is JMU's, which used to be the old middle school, was first built in 1948. So you don't have any room in the ceilings for ductwork, period. So we have to go to these split systems where the unit is on the outside and they just have a minor penetration in the wall. People have seen them, the Mitsubishi splits. I don't know if they're Mitsubishi. Who knows what they are? But they're all tied into our building management system. So that's how we handle that. The middle school, we were fortunate enough to, when we built the middle school, to be able to put the air conditioning as part of the building project, which that was only an additional, I say only, it was on back then, it was $300,000 to air condition 120,000 square feet of building. It was a deal. So we jumped on it. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury in the buildings that we do have because of the multiple additions and the multiple years that they were built in. So maybe some areas we could, like some of the 97 additions, I don't know. But that's a whole discussion. But this is just for targeted areas. We're going to talk to Sarah Reinhardt over here. That's Sarah right there. And we'll talk with the building principal to see where the most need for these systems are going to be according to the population, the demographics that come into that building at that time.
Can I follow up on that one? Because I had a question
Sure,
about
sure.
them too. My question was very similar, actually. and I think you've answered it. I was wondering if this was a sort of a plan where we were eventually going to have them in all the classrooms, but it sounds like that's not feasible.
That's not feasible.
How many do we have currently?
It's one in each computer lab. Let's see.
We
Probably
they're random. I don't have an exact number for you. Some schools might have, like an elementary, one might have 8, one might have 2. It's random.
Okay, thank you.
My only point was, one of the things that we hear a lot is, people compare Merrimack to Bedford. And one of the things that that Matt just brought up is we have a school that was built in 1948. So the repairs to an old school versus they have a brand new high school. So they hit that one building. They don't have the repairs. They don't have to put $3 million into a roof. So a lot of times people want to do those comparisons, but there's a different need and there's a different expenses for a school, a town that believed in education for a very long time, 1948 high school. But we do have those big expenses.
So a lot of my questions were just because I didn't know what some things meant. So I was just looking for clarification on some things. And this is just like a subtle detail. I was just wondering, looking at, was it the water? Do different schools use different amounts of water? Like the 3 elementary schools have different
And I'm going to
amounts?
say yes, they
Yeah.
do. And there's a couple different reasons, different populations at each school. Thorntons and Reeds have a greater population than Mastacola Elementary School. Although Mastacola Elementary School, one of them is watering for the field
Oh,
a little bit. So different schools all have different ways of playing that. So it's never totally consistent. I think even if we had the same amount of students at Thorntons and the same amount of Reeds, there would still be a little bit of shift between there.
Sure. Yeah, I found it interesting. That's all. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't actually write this down, but since you brought it up, I noticed, I can't remember which school it was, that like most of them had natural gas, but one of them is heating with oil, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yes,
because the pipeline doesn't go across the bridge. That's
Got it.
Reed's.
Reeds Ferry.
Then so I saw that and I was like, oh, I wonder why. And then I didn't feel like writing
We
it down.
would love to have done when we did them all back in, I forget when it was. It was a five-year lease purchase thing we did with Liberty Utilities and whatnot. I think it only took 5 years to pay it off, and we did all natural gas to all the buildings. We didn't put NG in the superintendent's office or special services because, 10,
We
15
know.
years ago we were supposed to replace those, but here we are, and they're still running on oil. But there was no pipeline going across the bridge, so it is what it is.
Is there now or
No,
there still isn't? Okay.
no.
And then I just looking at the gym floors, I was just wondering because the budget was on page 3, funds necessary for maintenance of the wood floors. Are those painted every year, or are those like on a need by need basis, or it's like kind of worst come first serve?
All of gym floors are scrubbed and recoated.
Every
and
year?
That's every year. Now, in that process, which happened to us last year at at the middle school, is we have had it sanded. Normally, you have a floor sanded between, at least for us, it's between somewhere around 15 to 20 years. That needs to be resanded. Means what they have to do is sand it right down, right to the wood. Then we repaint it and do everything we have to do at that point. The tricky part about that is there's only so many sandings you get in the floor. So at like this present time, like the high school gym, there's no more sandings left. So if we would in the future say, hey, we need to redo the high school gym floor, that would mean a replacement. So it is handled a little different, but it is definitely addressed every year.
That's
And
good
to follow off of that, and that amount for $275,000 is in the capital improvement plan for the year 25-26. That's why it's so much, because at that point in time, Tom says, you only have so much of a tongue where the groove meets, and you just can't sand anymore. So
Sure.
we're done.
Right.
as
Once
far
you
as
start
that goes.
seeing nails,
That's
you're
bad.
done.
Yeah.
Basketball players don't like that.
No.
Great. Those were my questions. Any other questions from the board? Go ahead, Naomi.
gonna go look and see what they were because page 2. Finding it.
That's the rubbish disposal, right?
Oh, I was just curious why we didn't spend very much money on trash disposal in 22-23. I'm just curious.
I know, unfortunately, I'm gonna bring up a word that no one wants to hear.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. But during COVID, sometimes the trash got emptied and sometimes it didn't. We'd call them up and they say, Tom, I have nobody. And as soon as I get somebody over there. So it was real hit and miss. So it was kind of a tough year. So I would say that the reason why I level funded it is because I really didn't get a good look at it that year.
It was an abnormal year.
I believe so.
And then page 3. I wrote down my question and now I don't remember what I meant by it.
Well, I do have one here, and it says,
Oh, there, it's the cameras. I found
yes.
it. Yep. Yeah, I was curious why the cost went up on that.
A couple years ago, we added new cameras, and they were under a 1-year protection plan, and they came off. So now they switched to a service plan. So we added a bunch of cameras into our system now. As you can see on that page, we have quite a few cameras.
Yeah,
to
which is a good
supply.
thing.
And that's why.
What is this is again just something I saw and didn't understand, so I was curious about it. What is the mechanical/energy management/maintenance agreement?
That is the agreement that we have with the company. They come in and keep our boilers, hot water heaters. They replace our filters and basically monitor our system 24/7. And they make any repairs that needs to happen to our mechanical system, HVACs, anything like that.
Cool, thank you. I think the last one that wasn't covered by other people was the windows at JMU's. How old are they? The ones we're replacing, and how bad are they?
Basically brand new. They're 52 years old.
There you go.
Yeah, and some are in real serious need of them. Unfortunately, I'm going to admit to it. We do use duct tape sometimes to cover some edges. Just absolutely needs to be done. That is.
Those tractors were actually a package deal with the windows.
Yeah.
I think 52 years. Yeah, it's time for new windows. And the last thing I have is just a comment. Is we're talking about all these projects we want to get done, and the bottom line on this budget was down a bunch. So we're talking about all these extra projects that we're wanting to do, but this maintenance budget as a whole is lower than it was last year by 21%, according to my math. So we're not like breaking the bank here. So these are all necessary things, and I'm happy to support them.
And to piggyback off of what Lori said, the reason we are able to have buildings that are as old as they are and functioning as well as they do is a testament to you and your team, and the fact that we do immaculate maintenance on our building. We keep up with it. We don't let things fall into disrepair. Can we do everything at once? No, but we do the roofs when they need to be done. We do the windows when they need to be done. We do these things because we might not have the nicest, the most stunningly beautiful brand new buildings, but they are immaculately clean and they work really well for us because we keep up with them. We do really great regular maintenance. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. So, during the days when I coached at Merrimack High School and I would go to schools all over New Hampshire, I couldn't believe the conditions of schools. And that's when I really had a deep appreciation. And you've been here all those years. So, please thank your team. I know that sometimes you're short-staffed, but our schools are, like you just said, immaculate and well-maintained. And we really appreciate the work that you do for us and our community. And, if people haven't gone to other schools and see the disarray or, things aren't vacuumed and, stairs aren't swept and, things aren't painted and ceiling tiles are not replaced, You do all that work on top of everything else. So thank you.
And may I just make a point, pick up on something, Naomi, you mentioned with the budget being lower. To the taxpayers, what we don't do is engage in just incremental budgeting. If we budgeted 5,000, for example, last year, well, let's ask for 7,000 next year. But if we don't need it, based on the data, we don't request that money. So I wanted to pick up and make sure that people understand if we're just not adding on and piling on. If we don't need it, we don't ask for it.
Actually, one of my questions that I didn't ask was what projects did we do last year? Because it was down so much. Obviously, there must have been some one-off projects or something last year that we're not doing this
Well,
year.
in one of the lines you're looking at, there was the roof project for J Muse, which was $1.1 million. It's a warrant article. So that's incorporated into that district repair account. So we're not doing that this year, but we are slated to look at, when we do the CIP, $707,000. So it's a net difference of around 400 grand down that we're going to be in that area.
There's a number of other items in there. There's also a track repair that we did, that you would say. We also did some repair of partitions in bathrooms. You would also see, I already mentioned the gym floor at the middle school, but those are items
Yeah.
that are also.
But
in
yeah,
there.
it was specific projects. We did them, and if we need money for new things in the future, we hope you'll ask. And we're glad that, as Bill said, you're not just asking for it for the sake of asking for it. You're asking for what you need, and we appreciate that. And I know the taxpayers appreciate it too.
There are no more questions. We thank you so much for your time tonight, and thank you for answering our questions and for everything you do, of course, you and your team. All right, we shall move on to our next budget presentation, which will focus on technology and library services. And we have our director here tonight, Mr. Jason Pelletier.
Hi everybody, thanks for having me. For this upcoming fiscal year's budget, for everybody at home and in front of us. So our aim in the technology and library services is to provide students, teachers, and staff with the tools they need to succeed in the 21st century. And also we support teaching, learning, and operations across the district. So when you go and you start looking through our budget, you'll see increased spending for more resources in tech and library. You'll see the portion of the capital improvement plan. It's a 6-year plan. This will be year 2 of that 6-year plan. A couple of the major budget increases when you start looking through the budget, you're going to see instructional equipment repairs up to about 200% due to increased device repair needs. Also, we're finding that we're doing a little bit more maintenance for like speakers and for intercom systems. We're doing amp replacements. We're also part of that is e-waste removal. So we want to make sure that we take care of all of the old electronics and things that are being replaced responsibly, and also that if there is any data on there, even though we do our due diligence to make sure that data is clean or destroyed, that we use a company that will guarantee that any information is also destroyed if they find any. The technology and capital improvement plan, it's up about 8%. And that 8%, you'll see the cost of business is always going up. So you'll see a little increase of that. But what's in that budget that wasn't in there last year was we're also upgrading a firewall. And that's a pretty big expense. We got quotes around 158,000, and we were able to whittle them down to right around that $100,000 range. So it's not a cheap piece of equipment that's in there. We're also doing we have 2 SANs in the district, storage area network. It's like a big speedy hard drive that we can use, a big box that has a bunch of hard drives that we can use. Servers in what we call a virtual environment. It saves a lot of cost. It's efficient. It is big money, but you save a lot of money by having a lot less hardware in there, and that's another big expense, around $100,000 as well. So we did one of those last year. This is going to be our second one. So you'll see that in there. One thing that you'll also see, software and licensing is up quite a bit. That's kind of like that big standout in our budget, and it's up around 72%, which is pretty big. One of the big pieces of that is Microsoft went and they changed their licensing up. So before we did what was called FTE, full-time employment, right? And that was around 415 users, right? So that's going to be any type of full-time employee, teachers. But if anybody's part-time or contractors or whatever, they wouldn't count towards that. Microsoft changed it to what they call education qualified user, which is another way of saying anybody that absolutely needs to use that. So part-time, full-time, contractors, volunteers, anybody. So that number went from, again, 415, now we're at 1,120. So that made that increase go up about $59,000 for that. And some people will ask, well, why are we spending all this money on Microsoft when we have these Chromebooks and we're going more towards Google? Like, why does that happen? And that's a really good question. And one of the things is, no matter what, our infrastructure runs on Windows servers. So that licensing has to do with some of that cost. And then the other part is we use the Microsoft A3 license. And what the Microsoft A3 license gives you is that desktop version of Microsoft. You ask anybody that's been using Microsoft 365, they're going to tell you that the online version of that is not great, right? So a lot of people are still going to need, because we're just in the infancy of adopting that Google and getting people comfortable to that. So next year, I think that it's prudent to keep that full A3, just so that we can start helping people go more towards, get more comfortable. And there's a lot of curriculum in there. There's classes that are built on it. District office will always have it. Building administration will always have that. But I think, as you'll see, naturally that those numbers will go down. But for this year, it's probably more prudent to keep those numbers up, because again, that's what gives you that desktop version, and then we can get real analytics on who's using, who's not. We can also talk to people that might just need a little bit of more training to feel a little bit more comfortable. So that's a huge part of that too. We also added a new ticketing system. That's $7,000 add in there. There's also just the cost of all of the software is going up tremendously. And now that we're really starting to go forward with that one-to-one and we're adopting more tech, the teachers that have been using certain software now it's starting to trickle into other grades and uses, and we're seeing really good results from that. So it's important not to kind of pull that away and say, hey, we have all of this tech, but now we're going to get rid of it. But one thing that we do need to do is start really advocating for what tools are more appropriate that align with our curriculum and what don't, and how do we look at that. And so those conversations are going to start happening. So you're going to start seeing that software line go down. And we've already started pulling some software out of there. So when you see those increases, just to give you guys an idea of why that number jumped so much. We also added a couple of other software or buildings, like for the school as a whole, like the district as a whole. Like we have like things like school dismissal manager and other things. So other schools are adopting more of that tech, which it's an added increase to that. You'll also see a couple of other minor increases, I would say, for like items like library materials, books, periodicals, STEAM resources, telephone service, and for the most part, our projectors and everything like that, like those types of replacements, we're getting it starting to get ahead of that. So that capital improvement plan is really helping. So we're not seeing as many failures with that, but the items that we are putting in, a projector doesn't cost $300 anymore, right? So you're in like $1,200, $1,500 sometimes for those projectors. So we're going to see less repairs, but the cost of those repairs are going up. And I'm available for any questions. And again, thanks for having me.
Go ahead, Lori.
I just want to circle back around to the software and licensing and say this. At my school, we use all Google, Google Classroom, all of that. And privately, I use Microsoft because I've been doing Word forever. And as an economics teacher, I'm sorry, but Sheets just does not have the macros that Excel does. And most colleges are expecting students to come in with some software application experience in Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. And so I think we need to keep that in mind that while, Google is really great for K through 12 schools, most of the colleges are still using Word, PowerPoint, and I'm telling you, going from Google to Word, it'll mess up your formatting every time. Going from desktop Microsoft to online Microsoft Word will mess up your footnotes, your bibliography every time. And so I see the need for having that desktop option and it being really important, especially for our students who are doing the accounting and those things in the high school and the expectation of what they need when they graduate, if they go on to college. So yes, I understand I saw that at our own school, the licensing just go through the roof this year. So it was painful.
It was a surprise, that's for sure.
Is there a way, maybe, because I agree with you. I think all the Microsoft Office stuff is important, especially preparing kids for post high school. What is the software like that licensing? Does that I assume it includes the Office. What else is that wrapped up into that 300% increase besides the Office components?
That's really the majority of it. A little bit of the server licensing went up a little bit. We've added another layer of like database, but you're only talking a few $100 because that runs on data center and SQL and everything like that. So some of those costs but for the most part, the numbers stayed even. Just the licensing quantity went up.
Okay. Yeah, well, and I didn't touch any of the Microsoft stuff until I got on this board. I was a Google person forever, and I struggle with the Microsoft stuff. So when I saw that, I was like, I thought we were getting rid of Microsoft, but I'm glad to hear that explanation, and that makes a lot of sense to me. Because you're right, the formatting is terrible when it reformats. It's always so bad. Not being an Excel person, but married to an Excel person, I hear all the time how Sheets is just not up to snuff. So I had another just quick question since talking on page 5, the additional equipment for library. I just noticed there was a big chunk that's gone down quite a bit. So I was just wondering if there was explanation as to why or why it went from budgeted for 21,000 to 5.
So a lot of that for library is now over in technology and part of that technology capital improvement plan. So a lot of like that repair cost would come out of there. So library is a little bit more streamlined into more of like the library services type of thing, so they can concentrate on that area of their expertise a little bit more.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Lori.
I just want the town to know that we are one-to-one, but if a student loses their laptop or something breaks, that parents do pay for that. So this budget is really for instructional, and even though we're one-to-one, the students have some responsibility to the equipment.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you, Lori.
One of my questions kind of follows up on that nicely is because as a parent with kids in a district, I know they offer I think it's like $10 for the insurance for the Chromebook. I was curious how the economics of that are working out. Like, what's the uptake and how many Chromebooks do we typically have to repair or replace?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I know that once we kind of streamlined the payment process and did it more electronically, that the uptake of people actually taking that $10 service went up. But I mean, we have a lot, not a lot, but we have a lot of movement in the repair process, but we haven't been seeing abuse of that. We haven't, nothing's been a red light as far as like, oh, this isn't working out. So all of the funding, we haven't gone red or anything like that on that. But I can get you better numbers as soon as I can.
So this is sort of a budget question, maybe for like future budgets. You mentioned school dismissal manager. So that's one of the things we license, I imagine.
Correct.
But only in some schools, right? Like,
Correct.
so will streamlining that actually be better for us financially? I only ask this because as a parent that has often had multiple kids in multiple schools, like if you have a kid at Thornton's Ferry, a kid at JMU's, and a kid at the high school, there are 3 different ways to let the school know your child may or may not be there. And listen, like maybe my life is busier than the average person, but I'm like, which one do I do? And I'm, you know, and inevitably I do the wrong thing, or I don't do it correctly or whatever. But if we streamlined it, would that be like a sanity saver for people and a financial benefit to us? Like, is it going to cost us more or less? Like,
Yeah.
I know this is sort of a budget question and sort of not, but it honestly, it's something I've always wanted to ask since you mentioned it.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what we do too. So we see disparities here and there, and so what we did was we clumped it all together this year, and it's only a few $100s because they're like you have 4 buildings, right? You know, so they're like it's not like it's not like a district.
This is only Reed's, Thornton's, and MES, right? Is JMU's using it also?
JMU's was considering it, but not
They're
yet.
considering it.
Yeah.
It started off at Thornton's Ferry, and then it kind of bloomed from there. I don't know if it's feasible to do at the middle school and the high school, because when kids leave, they just leave.
They just leave, yeah.
Yeah.
But we could
Yeah.
talk about it for sure.
I'm just curious. It
Yeah.
would be great to at least streamline all the elementary schools.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that MES and Reed's has got, because I was a Thornton's parent. When they got that, I was like, this is the best thing since sliced bread, because I could just go on the app on my phone and be like, yep, she's not at school today. You know, and then at JMU's, I'm like, where is the email that I'm supposed to email again? Like, I'm the worst.
How do you really feel about that, Jeff?
It's just finding an email sometimes is the thing that tips me right over the edge, Matt.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jason regarding library and technology?
No, I don't think I do. I think he covered it all in his presentation, which was awesome. Thank you.
Well, I want to follow up with what Naomi just finished with and just say, I am so glad you are here. You do such an excellent job with all of these services. And your explanation last year, particularly of why we needed to make this investment and have this in our CIP, was excellent. And I appreciate all of your very detailed information.
Thank you.
You do
very
a
much.
great job.
Yep. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
For
very
sure.
much.
And just, talking about our conversation earlier, looking at last year's budget that we were all super proud of. And part of that was a major technology infrastructure overhaul in a year of record inflation. And again, only 1.4% increase. So, and that was a huge part of your work. So thank you again for that.
Thank you.
And like you said, we're in year 2 of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of all
Part
of
of it.
these things that we are deeply investing in to improve our district.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jason. All right, moving on down. The next contestants. We have 2 Lauries, they have 2 Sarahs. Student services and student wellness.
Good evening. Thank you for letting Sarah and I come to present the student services budget. I know there's multiple parts to this particular budget. If you look at the special education portion of the budget, that represents the anticipated cost because we're budgeting for the students we have in front of us right now, the students we anticipate may be in special education and their needs next year, which is kind of an interesting experience, right? We base that on history, we base that on referral numbers. and move forward. This represents what we anticipate the cost of providing a quality, free, and appropriate public education to our students with disabilities will be. And our student population right now currently is 21% of our student body that have educational disabilities. So we do have a decent number and a significant number of students who are impacted by this budget. When you look at this budget, there are a couple pieces for the special education section that may look a little different and that may be a little noteworthy. One is the elementary contracted service lines, and we'll see an increase in that simply due to the fact that we're seeing an increase in referrals in our special education for our younger grades and our preschool age students. And this is a trend that's seen across the state of New Hampshire right now. It's not unique to us. And actually, research is showing and people are anticipating that districts are going to see a continued increase in special education referrals since COVID and the addressing of that. You're also going to see there's an increase in costs because we do know that our contracted service providers and our out-of-district placements, our special education day schools, will have an increase in costs. It's set by the state. The state says you can have up to a certain percent. Typically, that runs about 3%. Some come in lower. Some years, the state has said you can have up to 5%, but we don't have those numbers right now. They give that out to us at a later point in time. So we always kind of consider, okay, we're going to run somewhere between a 2 and 3% increase with those particular numbers. There's also a change in what we would call our special ed day placements, our out-of-district placements for students by grade level and also within the state of New Hampshire and outside of the state of New Hampshire. So what you'll see is money movement to go, okay, maybe some students have aged out, so they are no longer needing special education. They may have returned to our public school, or they may have shifted grade levels. They may have left a program in one state and moved to another, which is why oftentimes when we try to follow those numbers, we look to see, oh, this one went down 200,000, but this one didn't go up the same, because it's a movement based upon the needs of children that we have now. And right now we have approximately 20 children in out-of-district placements, with less than 10 of them being placed through the court system and behavioral health. Also, as part of the student service budget, we do have our SEL programming, and I know that's kind of the first part that we're going to highlight. And just to bring some attention to how that was developed, one of the things we looked at with Matt, because he has the history and we've been here 6 months, is to say, help us figure out, these are the programs we have, how do we best bring this forth in this budget? So what we see are numbers in there that represent the pulling of small amounts of funds from different accounts to put into one centralized location to support different programming for students. Which is why, again, if we're looking to go, okay, I see this increase here, where does it offset here? We looked historically with Matt's help to pull together numbers from other different accounts that may have been spent differently over time to put in that particular line. And Sarah will talk a little bit more about that. And so I know there's some questions, so Mr. Martin, I'm going to look to you to say, what would you like us to start with next?
Sorry. Do you want to have him give the full presentation before we go into the questions?
I
Yep,
think that
let's
would
do
be
that.
best.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay.
Thank you, Board, and thank you, Sarah. So we'll talk a little bit about student wellness today, and in particular, just continuing the great work you guys have already put forth in previous budgets. One thing that I'd like to point out to you is that we changed 2 of the lines in title. So last year, 2 of these lines represented funding for K through 6 expenditure, and another line represented funding for 7 through 12 expenditure. That's been changed. So line 100-2122-41-8610-10 has changed to representing tier 1 or universal needs for students. This aligns with the multi-tiered system of support in behavioral health and wellness that we all know and love. And in addition to that was previously our elementary budgeting. Line 100-2122-41-8610-20. That was previously our secondary supplies, and that has changed to tier 2 or our advanced tier initiatives. So again, those are more focused initiatives, and the reason for that was to better align with what we're actually doing and spending on our students. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, because what you see in here might look a little different from last year, just because the items represented in these lines are slightly different. Some big pieces here that might be a little bit different. We focused on providing some additional support and continuation of programming that we already do, either through grant work or currently funded. So an example of that would be continuing our work with DESA to have a universal screener within our schools and expanding that from K to 8 up through 12. In addition to that, we are continuing our work with looking at Second Step. So we funded that here in the budget, but I did hear what you said about looking into it, and we're currently in the process of looking at Second Step as our elementary curriculum for social emotional learning. We're actually meeting next week as a team on that and are looking at 4 other curricula in comparison to Second Step. So I just want you to know that it is in here as a representative of curriculum, but we are examining it to make sure it still fits the needs of our student body. On top of that, we've introduced an idea around summer camp for kindergarten, and by summer camp we really mean an opportunity for students to be introduced to our building. Our youngest learners, they have one of the hardest transitions, especially those who do not start in preschool here with us, people who are coming from private preschool or our learners from other areas, or students who have never attended school at all or daycare at all. This is an opportunity for them to be acquainted with the building. It would be similar to what you see in other districts where it's not a full day or anything like that. It's just an opportunity for students to come in, learn a little bit about what we do here in Merrimack, and start with the Merrimack way. In addition to that, we really are focusing on making sure that we're supporting all of our learners. So making sure we have supplies for our wellness staff. That's something that's really important, making sure that our professionals can do what they need to do every single day to support our students. Continuing with our parent education, providing opportunities for parents to learn more within our district around not just social emotional learning, but wellness in general, and making sure that we're continuing our work with YES and the Nashua Youth Council. I did get all your questions, and I'm happy to take them in whichever order you'd like.
Does anybody want to start?
Let's start with the big one, the $300,000 increase.
Yes,
on SEL.
absolutely. Sure. So that's actually just a movement. That's not an increase per se. Oh, yeah.
What lines they came from?
Sarah, do you want to?
So I'm gonna, as Matt and I looked through these budgets and looked at where we were gonna pull it from, I don't know that we could give you the specific line, and Matt, I can look to you for that. It was really looking at a cobbling of resources. A bunch of lines went down as we were pulling it. We're not gonna be spending from these lines, therefore we can take a little bit from this line, a little bit from that line, and put it into this one location. Matt, did you want to add
Yeah,
to that?
I don't have any specificity on that. I do know the YES program has bloomed to around 300K, and it was taken from the high school lines, the various high school lines, and then it was consolidated in the SEL Special Services area.
Yeah, so this represents staff that we already have in place.
Okay, so for us to defend that, though, I would like to have that data, because when you look at the budget, there's a lot of items that are the same. They're not gone, they haven't gone down. So I would like to know where those monies were. Like you said, when you talked about the tier 1 and tier 2, and you told us exactly where those came from. I would like to have that data to be able to see where that transfers came from.
Absolutely.
So we have a budget worksheet that Sarah and I created with the BA to go, okay, this is where this was, this is what we need, this is how we anticipate the different student needs and the movements, so we can look through that.
Yeah, and that and going back to what Lori was saying, that clarification on the tier 1, like that one makes sense to me once you've explained it to me. And I think everybody on this board, when we saw that 360, 360, we were like, whoa, okay, like where'd that come from? So yeah, if we could get kind of the specifics on that, where that was pulled from, that would really help a lot.
Absolutely.
And what I'm understanding you're saying is that's not like a new program or a new initiative or anything. That's stuff that's paying for things we already do.
Correct.
We just need to know which things and where it's coming from.
Yeah, they were over here and now they're here.
And it's also to open it up to more students. So it sounds, again, having been here for 6 months, I'm going upon the history
Sure.
I have. And the history I have is that it was traditionally for special education students. However, it's a resource that for students that it's appropriate for, they don't need to be special education. It's not unique to that particular learning area. So it's moving that to a line that says, okay, this is for all students.
Making it more accessible.
Yes.
So Matt, can you just go back? So the YES program is moved into this? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, there was some of these expenditures out of a grant before, or in grants before. And so instead of utilizing the grant for it, it was put in the operating budget.
So it was, so the YES program at one point in time was grant funded.
Grant
And
funded.
now it's not
And
grant
it
funded.
really should not have been grant funded. So it's out of the grant, it's into the general fund, and other things that are going to be utilized out of the special services budget are now going in the grant. So it's a shifting between grant and in an equal and a like fashion, so to speak. But like I said, I don't have specificity on what those numbers are precisely. All I know is historically, we were spending around $300,000 a year on the YES program at Merrimack High School.
So are we still having kids in the YES program?
Yes.
And so it's middle school and high school.
Used to be just high school. Started off around, with like 10 kids in the high school.
Yeah.
And over the years, it bloomed.
Yeah. And so now, how many kids are in the YES program in the middle school and high school?
So it varies. I know it's actually middle school, high school, and the upper elementary school. So I know that as kids shift through. So at one point, I believe we were looking between 20 and 30 students, but they shift through. We don't want it to make it a permanent resource, right? We wanted to go, okay, we're going to put in this intervention. Children are going to respond to it. And if they don't respond to it, then that tells us something else that we need to look at. And so then we go, okay, there's time and space. Other kids have moved off. So now there's some new referrals that came in right before the holiday break that we would look at accessing the YES program with.
So I have another question. So for the YES program, if we have students that, have issues and maybe are suspended, do we still have the ability to send them to the YES center, or is that something we can do? Because so they would still be out of school suspended if they hit like a level 4. Because I know like that used to be part of the YES program, which I always really liked because then they were still learning.
And to
I'm
my
gonna
knowledge,
talk
I'm
about
going to
that
look
right
to
now.
you, but we don't have access to that in Merrimack, and I don't know that YES continues to do that even in other districts.
We do have in the high school, and we paid for it for 3 years out of the ESSER funds. $65,000 for the YES person to be in the high school for in-school suspension purposes. So that cost has been, because ESSER is gone now, and that program was in danger of being gone if we didn't pick it up in the general fund. So that is in the high school budget to the tune of $65,000.
And I just want to say, like, having experience with the YES program, I do think it's really necessary for some students to have those resources because otherwise they would be high school dropouts and then it's going to cost us a lot more.
I have a layperson question. What is the YES program?
Oh, thank God.
Sarah,
somebody
do you
asked.
want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it's a program. Historically, what I've seen in other districts is that it's a program that typically students access through being court appointed. But here in Merrimack, we're lucky enough to have that support right in district. So students that need additional support, an adult mentor, maybe struggle with school access, things of that nature, this adult is assigned to them to help bridge that gap. They support the family with information, and they support the student in being a trusted adult that's available during the school day as needed. Some families have even signed off releases so that the YES worker can come be a support in terms of like in the morning, all right, we got this, let's go to school, it's going to be a great day. Just providing a lot of much needed support for students that might be very at risk for a dropout.
And from special education, it's very preventative in the sense of, okay, we're getting kids to school in a way in which they don't have a disability preventing them from coming to school. So we're getting them to school and we're providing a support between our typical regular ed supports and special education.
Thank you. I appreciate that information. And like Lori said, we're trying to decrease our dropout rate. So that is something that is hugely important, and I love understanding what it is.
Sarah, don't they also work with Job Corps?
Yes.
I want to piggyback kind of on a big picture idea, since Sarah wasn't here for our previous budget discussions last year. I've been a fierce advocate for the student services budget since I was on the budget committee and as a board member. But last year we hired 2 reading interventionists under the idea that if we could prevent identification for SPED services due to COVID and due to the learning loss, that it would keep our numbers to the students who really, really need our services. And My concern is that, just based on your opening statement, that you're anticipating growing due to COVID when we hired interventionists to prevent that growth. So my question is, how do you see moving forward, especially looking at the budget and how we're maintaining budget and funding and staff, to help students with learning loss that don't really need an IEP or 504, so that our numbers aren't, 28% of our population or 29% of our population?
So, having not been here, and I know there's reading interventionists, and that those positions are essential. Reading and math interventions are essential, especially at our youngest age groups, right, where our kids are most vulnerable, where our impact is the greatest. One of the struggles we're coming up with our students who are these new referrals is it's really not about reading and writing anymore. It's really about what we're seeing is high populations of students who didn't get early intervention services. So they might have a developmental delay, but didn't have access to early intervention. So now, where the students would have come in with perhaps less intensive needs, they're more impactful needs. When we see a lot of students coming in with anxiety or other kind of mental health issues that really border that line between, is this special education or is it not? Can we access a service like yes? And so and then those reading interventions become very important, because as we're managing those needs, we're also providing a little extra that reading and that math to keep them up to date and keep them going. So it really is a very different population of students that we see since COVID.
I'm just going to piggyback on that. So, Chuck will remember this, and maybe even our tech person will remember. So in the high school I was at, we hired the yes person to be our full-time, we hired them to work in our school full-time, Bill. And they called it Bill's Room. And it was an incredible change for our school district to have a place full-time for any student to go to. And he had the skill. He was a retired guidance counselor, had incredible skills, but it actually saved us money because they were there full-time and that was their job. And it actually decreased our attendance. It increased our attendance. It decreased our dropout rate was horrible my first year there. We went to 0 every single year, and a lot of it was because of Bill. So just like saying what Jenna said, like maybe looking at, the future, how we can just put it into one silo, maybe.
Yes.
And one thing, not really a question, but one thing in my building where I teach, special ed referrals are going up in our district like 50%. It's a lot, and it's because of it's why we know why. It's the COVID, it's the learning loss, and parents are nervous for their kids, and so do we this is impossible to answer, I'm sure, but do we see in the future of maybe like plateauing at some point and seeing those numbers go down as a result of that?
So impossible to answer, yes.
Yes. Okay.
My hope is absolutely. One of the pieces that it's gonna take is time, right? And it's gonna take time, and it's going to take a lot of things, like when Sarah brought up that kindergarten transition program. Well, it's more essential now than ever to have kids being introduced to public schools, because we have students who maybe went to private daycares or private preschools, now just home and not having access. So, and then those kind of programmings and that kind of time is going to be really important. And then putting those social emotional pieces in place so we can help kids adjust, because for many students, it's this concept of learning loss, which becomes a little challenging because you can't lose what you didn't have. And yet we also have students coming in who haven't had exposure and who come from homes where they haven't had early intervention, or homes haven't been safe, or haven't been given the care they needed. And so as we get through that and we all adjust and the supports we have in place adjust, I do think maybe the referrals won't plateau, but we'll be able to better identify the difference between we need tier 2 supports and we have an educational disability. And right now, that's really the hard part, as many of these students haven't had early intervention, so we probably never even would have seen them. There's a lot of students who have early intervention that never make it to special education in the public schools, because they've had that time and that access to remediate what was just a slight developmental delay.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, I don't think it's a clear answer you're looking for. But
No, that's kind of what I expected. So.
May I just address something, Lori, a comment that you made? We will see some mitigating impact of the early intervention reading services on the special education numbers. I can absolutely assure you, we saw it in the district that I worked in previously. Amy and I were just talking today about the fact that we want to be able to provide you with some information down the road that a program or an intervention is working. Because that involves the concept, as you know, return on investment, that we want to be able to show you that there is some payback for that investment.
I really appreciate that. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I really appreciate that because I think that's what our town really wants to see. They are okay, I think, with investing if they can see what the return on their investment is. They're not okay with repeatedly investing in things that aren't working.
And I'll add to what Jenna said. We had a conversation this afternoon specifically that, and I'm saying this more for the town, that we recognize that changes needed to be made in our curriculum overall. And we've invested in those last year, and we need to continue investing this year in reading and math changes. It'll be 3 to 5 years to see that change in our test scores and our performance of our students. So it's a long-term investment. It's not a short-term investment, but that is what our town is looking and waiting for. So, you know, when data comes in, and we did see some of it on the STAR testing when you presented that, we're seeing some of it in small batches. And I think we're going to see more as we go along, and it is going to improve.
And I would just add, one of the things that I worked on with Heather Barker and now with Sarah is the coordination of not just the core curriculum, but then what are we doing for intervention? And, you know, we know that there was not commonality. There was not a common experience at the lower elementaries. And so what we're looking at now is, once you know what your core programming is, what are your core interventions? And when we chose Foundations and Haggerty respectively, we also are looking at the intervention pieces that go with that and have very intentionally invested in the professional development and materials for our Title I tutors, and next will be our special education teachers. What do they need to be able to implement Just Words, which is the grades 4 and 5 tier 2 intervention. The next step is to provide some type of knowledge-based curriculum. I know there's a question about that, you know, later on. That's why we shifted to iReady, because we're really looking at what is the core program of what we're offering, and that was not consistent. And one of the goals that the board had that we talked about this summer was unpacking what are the different interventions that we're using and are they evidence-based? And, you know, I was a special ed teacher. I know others were here as well. A program doesn't work for every student, but you do have to have some evidence-based approaches, whether it's Edmark or Wilson or OG or whatever it might be. But if every time you're doing something different, that's not best practice. So that's the next step, is what are the core intervention programs that we're using, and how do we make sure that all kids at every one of our buildings have access to those materials, and then a high quality practitioner that can deliver that intervention.
So I just want to thank you personally. I have 7 grandchildren, and 5 of them are in school, and my oldest one, I usually don't talk too much about my grandkids, but his abilities this year, his learning has grown so much, his confidence, and it's all because of the work of your staff and you. And so I do appreciate that, because he struggled, and he's extremely bright, but he struggled and he's doing so well. And I really do appreciate it, because that's the evidence right there.
Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful.
And I will share a very similar story with my own child, because my child was in kindergarten the year COVID came. And so my wife and I spent the last several years freaking out about what do we need to do for our kid to make sure he's successful. The last 2 years, it's like COVID never even happened. It's been amazing to see, and it's all because of the help that he's gotten at MES. So and your team as well. So thank you again. Just like Lori said, it's been huge. I've seen it. I've seen the progress. So
That's great.
Naomi, did I see your?
I had a question.
I also have 2 more questions.
On a different topic, though, so I didn't want to derail until people were done. Okay. It was actually a little bit on the topic of it dovetailed a little bit with return on investment and just sort of I'm curious about the status of I remember hearing last year that we had switched from having a lot of the service providers like OT and speech and that kind of thing be employees of the district to contracted services. And I believe I heard that was a savings. It was either the savings at the time or it was because we couldn't find them and keep them. And I was wondering if that's still the case and have we looked at that again?
So, and Matt, I'm going to let you jump in when you feel it's appropriate because I wasn't here last year for those conversations. We do have a lot of contracted service providers for our related service providers. That is not atypical to where districts are in the state of New Hampshire right now because there simply aren't people that want to work for school districts, that they can demand a higher salary. There's a lot of factors as to why we do end up contracting out. I do believe in every other district I've been in, and I have no reason to think that Merrimack would be any different. Every year we would advertise because there is always benefit to having our own employees. But for a select few positions where we might not be able to sustain a full-time employee, for example, might be a teacher of the deaf. If we only have a handful of students that need that service, that couldn't sustain a full-time employee. And in that case, it would not be a cost savings to the district. So in terms of cost saving, it really depends on that piece, but I do know that there just is such a shortage of employees and people willing to work in public schools. And it's really challenging because it also requires us to vet people a little more strongly than perhaps we would have. And it requires a little time delay where I think before COVID, if I had been meeting with an IEP team and they said, we need this service provider, I'd be like, no problem. I can think of 8 that have time in their day. Now I'm like, okay, we're going to get that going and I'll be working on that right away. Right. So it's the state in which we find ourselves across the state.
Thank you.
And my last question on page 3, I'm just wondering, are special ed students taking advantage of co-curriculars? Because it sort of seems like they're not. I assume they have the ability to participate in all these.
We put that account number in years ago in order to have them take advantage of co-curricular activities. There's even a para line in there for co-curricular activities for paras, if I remember correctly, to have them do that. And we have had students in the special ed department take advantage of co-curricular activities. One of the instances was bowling league, I mean, one was track. You have to have a para that could run with the track program, I'll tell you. But there's a lot of, but I don't know if it's being shown up at the expenditures over the last few years, probably due to COVID, probably due to a lot of things.
Right. Well, and
it's a tough to do comparative over the last couple of years, especially when you're going back 3 years, because the world stopped and what we know is to be right and what we expect just went topsy-turvy. We're going to need another 3 years to actually get into a period where things get more predictable.
Right.
And this budget here is the least predictable budget that we have in this entire school district. Sometimes it keeps me awake at night. And that's why we have an expendable trust fund of $546,000 in case there's an out-of-district placement that we haven't thought of. And I'll tell you, it can only take 1 or 2 kids that you didn't expect to come in to the district to just put that budget upside down.
Sure.
And another thing, we have to be careful with special ed. Okay, this budget is up. What are you up? 3%.
3%.
She's up. The budget is up 3%. We don't want to go backwards with special ed as far as budgeting goes, because if we do, then we run into the problems with our maintenance of effort. We can't budget less than the year before. This is something we need to report to the DOE. And if we start doing that, you know what they're thinking? They're thinking we're taking general fund stuff that should have been paid for in the general fund and we're stuffing it in a grant over here. We're doing this all the time. So we're not making the maintenance of effort. We're supplanting as opposed to supplementing. And when you do that, you lose over $1 million from IDA grant money. $1.2 million.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why we have to be careful with looking at special ed and doing the hard trim there. There is offsets that I saw in just cruising through the budgets where you've got out of district tuitions that are down around $800,000 to make up for the increase in the special services. That's why the entire budget only went up probably $450,000. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but it was around 3%. And that's a good increase to have in special ed, especially with the volatility of the tuitions and everything like that. I mean, it's just, it is one of those things that if you do not budget appropriately for special ed, it will put you in a deficit situation. And I've been there once in my life, not in this district, in another district, and I did not like that at all.
So let me respond to what you said, Matt. I agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. I think what would be beneficial for Sarah is to see in past years how we've done the budget. So if there was a movement of lines, it was explained under
Yep.
that line item. If there was a consolidation, there was an explanation. If there was an increase, there was an explanation in the budget. So that when we get the budget, you know, and we sit on it for 2 weeks over Christmas break, you know, we're only seeing the increased lines. We're not seeing the explanation. And that's just because you're new. And I think that would be beneficial for the board so that we have that best practice continued.
Yeah, that's something that, you know, when we were doing this, we were wrapping it up at the end, and it was kind of fast and furious, to be honest with you.
I understand.
Kind of like, felt like Vin Diesel driving, you know, down the road. Right?
You look like Vin Diesel.
Oh, I only wish I did. You know? And so, yeah, we will definitely, absolutely work on that. We'll work much closer to make sure we get everything in line and everything matches up. But there was a huge decrease in your out-of-district tuitions. And quite frankly, the SPED program never really was called out in the budget. It never really had a good home. It was one of these things where a lot of the stuff with curriculum development that we're going to talk about, right, Amy? Yeah. Okay. That was just taken, cobbled together through like 50 line items in the budget, and was never given its own due or its own message or its own line saying this is what it's for. We're trying to take that stuff that was in the back room and shed some light on it so we can do more, I don't want to say more transparent budgeting. That's what we're trying to do here.
I have a comment to that, because it's hard to, with this budget in particular, it's hard to, because if you go look at, I'm a spreadsheet person, so I like
so am
going
I,
and,
yeah.
and looking at the lines in the thing. I don't necessarily do as much of the reading of the pages in here, and so with special ed, it's particularly challenging because like there's the one part that's just the special services, but then there are lines in like the high school budget for some of that, and in the middle school budget for some of that, and so you can't look at it like I couldn't even figure out what percentage your budget was up or down like I did with all the other ones, because I knew that just looking at that one special services part wasn't the whole picture. So I don't know if it's easy for you, Matt, or not, to like pull that out somehow so that we could see.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that might be something to include for next year too. So that,
I
so that,
can,
like,
you know, that's how we figured out what the budget was for special education.
Right,
You know,
right.
we've got a report. It's called Special Education Report.
There
And
you go.
we run it, and it automatically says she's over by $500,000. It was a 3% increase. It's like, okay, this is good. We're not going to get in trouble with the DOE and everything like that with our maintenance of effort. We'll be able to keep our $1.2 million IDA grant and everything else that's good for us that we depend upon. And so, you know, that's an appropriate conservative increase, especially, like I said, for a budget that can be exceedingly volatile.
And one thing is, a few years ago when we were doing the budget before this team, the former superintendent told us like if we hired paras that we wouldn't need to hire teachers, and then we found out we do need to hire teachers. So one of the things, paras are not teachers, so we got that. So one of the things that we've asked the administration is if, you know, it's possible if we could look at the number of paras that we actually have. We know that it's listed, but not all of those people are really hired. And what is the exact need based on one-on-one, based on 504, based on classroom needs? And is there any movement with that we would really, and I know you're first year, but we would really love to have that information and documentation.
Absolutely, as would I. And so towards that end, one of the things that we've started to do is we're putting systems in place to provide clarity to certain parts of the IEP immediately. there'll be longer term systems around how we look at our IEPs so we can have consistency. So if you're in one building, if you have an IEP and your student has an IEP and they're going from MES to JMUs, we shouldn't see a radical change. We might see some scheduling changes as appropriate developmentally, but how our services are written should be similar. So that way we as parents can understand them as we move forward. So one of the things we're doing is creating a system for that. And part of that is how we write our paraprofessionals, because I can go and I can pull 15 IEPs and see 5 different ways to write them. And as a parent, I find that very challenging because I'm not entirely sure what I'm signing on. As a special ed director, I find it a little more challenging because I can't give you the information you're asking. So that'll take about a year to get that through all the IEPs. But as we do that, it also then allows us to have a conversation and say, okay, the reality is we know that we cannot make bodies appear. So we also know that we have to provide that support for students in different ways, whether it's through increased specialized instruction, whether it's through increased and more focused accommodations or modifications as appropriate. And we'll see those captured in the IEP. So we'll get a much better idea for where those paras fall. And, and it may open up a conversation that I know I've brought up with Mr. Olson around how we even assign paras. Right. And looking at, we are here for the best interest of students, and how do we make sure that we are assigning paras appropriately to meet the needs of the students that they are servicing with.
Well, I'll just say, as the parent of a student on an IEP who has hit the age where they will move through multiple schools rather quickly, I appreciate that very much because, like I said with the school dismissal manager, I mean, if you can't navigate that, you imagine me trying to navigate the switch on an IEP, with all these different things. It's so important. I mean, and I'm an educator. I can't imagine how parents have a student on an IEP if they're not an educator and they're trying to then navigate all these different ways that everybody writes everything. So to streamline and to make everything uniform in a way that makes sense is huge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hang on one second.
Okay.
Naomi May.
She's cooking something up.
No, I'm good.
There's so much tension. I was excited.
I know.
Yeah.
I was on the edge of my
Yeah.
seat. It's like
Yeah.
Well, so
watching
it
Bluff
was
by
based
Northwest.
on a conversation I was having with a friend. So I was like frantically going back through my texts, going, "What did that person say?" Something to like how special ed is, like you were talking about different buildings having different ways of writing IEPs and how that sort of like overall how we handle that as a district, like staffing wise, like how that all works, and is that going to change, or is it going to be yeah.
So the follow-up, so I don't say the follow-up, but I guess the next logical step from having a service grid, which is where our services are located, that leads to the budgeting, is I can sit then with the superintendent and the BA, as I do, and say, okay, I'm noticing that this school has this many units of speech and language that are group, this many units of speech and language that are individual. We need a staff member would be based on collective bargaining agreements, based on all those things, this amount of time. This school doesn't need that anymore because it's uniform. So I don't have to guess and say, what does assigned to a classroom with this particular service mean? And then we can go, okay, this school might have too much of one. This school doesn't have enough of another. So instead of going, oh, hey, Matt, I've got a contract out for a service here, I can say, actually, we have some service delivery time here. Let's put it towards this school if that's appropriate. And then we do that. So there is an actual, once we get that in place, and that again takes about a year to get through all the IEPs and really get used to it, it for Matt becomes a very easier way for me to present the budget to him, because I'm really living with what was created when I got here to say, okay, now I can go to you, Matt, and say, hey, I'm noticing this. And then I can come to the board, and I've come to the boards in the past and said, hey, based on this, we now can cut a speech path. And ironically, many times the boards have said, actually, we prefer you don't. Can we look at other supports and services around that? That's the decision we can bring forth. But then it has the data to say, this is why we need this position. This is really why we don't need this position to the same extent we did before. And this is how we're still meeting and providing a FAPE for children. And it becomes very data driven, as opposed to, I am working through this to the best of our abilities, and Matt and I are really monitoring where the special ed funding is.
I love data driven and I love organizing things and making them more efficient. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your very clear and thorough, concise explanations for our questions. It definitely helps our decision making quite a bit. Thank you for all your work as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Sarah's. All right. Next on the list is the district budget presentation by the one, the only, Mr. Matt Chevanel.
Okay, well, good. I get to start off. I just love this stuff, you know. The district budget is probably the most exciting piece of this entire. No, it's not. It's boring. It is boring. It's all the contractual obligations that we have. Well, except for your stuff, Amy. I didn't mean that in a bad way. But, you know, it's all our contractual obligations that we have: New Hampshire retirement, FICA, Medicare, health insurance. Let me go through a few items that that probably will answer a couple questions that I think some people had. That you don't see change. Support staff improvement, 78,000. Professional staff improvement, 51,000. Workshops, 75,000. Graduate studies, 120,000. District initiatives, 150,000. Those have been the same for a number of years. You want to know why? It's because they're in the MESA contract, or they're in the teacher contract. So we can't move those unless the contract changes. So hence they are there. Like if we were to move the district initiatives, that would have to be a bargained item. So those have remained the same in that category for a very long time. We do have some new items in the budget. That I'm very happy to see, because this is kind of more transparency of what we're doing and what we need. And Amy will talk to those later, but we have mentors for stipends for $80,000. We have curriculum instruction and assessment and some materials district-wide for $75,000. We have some additional professional development funds for $100,000. And we brought back, by popular demand, the school board contingency line. There was of much debate, and just had a great time with it with the budget committee, for $100,000. Mr. Moore, you're there? Yes, $100,000 contingency line is back in. And primarily that's because, you know, Bill and I love demographics. We like looking at all trends, and Bill loves to say cohort survival rate over and over again. And I know. You know, it's just one of these things that gets me jazzed, gets him jazzed too. And, you know, when we're driving around town and we're seeing this massive development, I'm going down DW Highway, and all of a sudden I look right where the Thirsty Moose is. Like, I've been in the Thirsty Moose a few times, probably you could tell. Anyway, and I look there and I see behind it, there's apartments there. And my wife's with me. She goes, look, and I'm looking up on the hill, and all of a sudden they just appear. There is, like, I don't want to call it unfettered growth in this town, because I know there is a plan to manage the growth. But boy, I'll tell you, sometimes when you're driving around, especially in the southern sections, you see apartments going up all over the place. Even near the outlet mall, you have the Slate apartment buildings that never figured they'd have any kids in there, because they made no provisions to have a bus stop. Right, but they have multiple kids in there, and we talked with the management of Slate corporate to do something about that. Me and Desmond on the phone, and basically they said, too bad, you know, it is what it is, and you can't go in the mall driveway to go pick them up. So this is kind of like, you know, we had the surprise at Reed's with the kindergarten class, and that was a surprise. We did not expect to have 119 kids in kindergarten at Reed's Ferry Elementary School. That is unheard of. But a lot of people came in, and they resided in the Reed's Ferry area, and it happened all at once, and it was what it was, and we just had to make do with it. And so this is a line here that we put in back. We had it, you know, the original thought was due to COVID. We didn't know what was going to go on with COVID, if we needed extra money or we need for whatever. And so we put this back because of the expansion in housing, that we're really not sure how many kids are we going to get at this point in time. This also includes an item like health insurance, you know, 15.9% increase. We took a portion of that. We didn't take the whole thing because what I'd like to do this year is, we had a $6.2 million surplus. Usually we run around $3 million, $3.5 million surplus. That's a comfortable level. But the year before that, we had 8.2. So we went from 8.2 to 6.2. Now we're trying to put that down a little bit. So we're a little conservative with that number. It is still $1 million because it is 16% of 14. It's a lot of money, And we'll see what the actual rate is going to be. This is the guaranteed maximum. We're given this for budgetary purposes by the Health Insurance Trust. And when it comes time, usually after the vote, sometimes we get lucky and we get what the actual rate is going to be before the deliberative session, and we have made a change on the floor when we've done that. Soon as we know, if it comes in at 5%, you're gonna know, and we're gonna give you a motion.
I want that email.
Yes, you want that email. You can. Well, whatever, and it may or may not. It did one year, and we made a motion on the floor to cut the operating budget by probably a few $100,000 right then and there. Dental insurance went up a moderate amount. We have all our insurances, our LTD for support staff and professional staff. Transportation is the continuation of a 5% a year contract. Great contract, great bus drivers, great company. No fuel escalation charge. I know the cost of fuel relative to what it was a couple of years ago has gone down a little bit. To me, I think $1 a gallon is good to pay. This $3.49 for my car, I'm still not liking that, even though they said it did go down. It doesn't feel like it went down for me, at least. Legal services, we increased that by around $50,000. You can see we spent around $80,000 last year in that line. That was something that we felt that we should kind of pump up a little bit. And contracted services, that's Power School, that's School Messenger, that's all the plugins that go to Power School. Power School is a really strong student information system that has the ability to be customized any single way you want, but you have to buy all the plugins to make it work, and you have to do a lot of programming to make it work. And a lot of times we have our Power School manager, she's a whiz, she's respected in the state. She does the single sign-on for us for all the reporting, and she's absolutely phenomenal, but we need help sometimes. And so we contract out to get other people to come in to do that work or to do some work for us to help us out. Like with middle school schedule changes and everything like that, this person will come in and be another set of eyes and ears because you don't want to mess it up. Same thing with the high school. So when you look at all that, it's like an increase of $1.5 million just for those lines that I've just kind of talked about. But then you flip the page, or you look whatever page you're on, and you see that we finally got rid of the middle school bond. I remember when we first floated that thing, and I went through the whole process of hiring an attorney and everything like that. I'm going, wow, 20 years, Matt, that's a long time. Boy, that is a long time. Are you going to see that? I don't know if you'll see that. Well, I'm here and I'm seeing it. So, that is not on the books for 24-25. We paid it off in 23-24. So that's around close to $800,000. So that's why if you were to do a central office now, because you have that reduction in debt, now would be an appropriate time to do that, because you could feather in the new bond issue and would still be less than what we're paying now by a couple $100,000 a year on the highest year itself. So that's my brief overview of central office budget. I don't know if Amy wants to just take over with, or you just want to ask questions, or whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Go ahead, Lori.
So Matt, when we have unused funds at the end of the year, we give it back to the town, and that's what I think Ken was talking about.
Yeah.
That the town has $8.2 million. Is there any way that we could, I just don't know, legally form a relationship with the town that maybe that money, we could use some of it to offset some of our capital improvement programs or things that we really need that we put off every year?
The cleanest way to do such, See, when you're a town, what they really should be holding on to around 5% of the surplus. That's the minimum. And that's around $5 million plus some change. Okay. That's good. They should hold on to $5 million. $8 million is getting up there a little bit, but it's still not, horrendous or anything like that. It's still good fiscal practice. But if they were to open the floodgates just like $1 million worth, that would have kind of helped out a little bit, especially in this era where we had the shift in assessed valuation. There's more on the homeowners. We lost $1 million in state aid. I brought in $2 million less in unassigned fund balance than the year before, because the year before was a total COVID mishmash where we couldn't hire anybody. And so it'd be nice to form a relationship with the town to say, hey, this is what our numbers are, because they get them before they set the tax rate. Can we have a conversation about what you could probably do? Maybe you just lower your tax rate a little bit, because I think in the end, it's what you're paying total. You can split the pie any way you want, but if the town is working with us and we say, hey, we got a bit of a high year here, can you help us out with opening your floodgates open because you have a higher reserve fund balance than we do? Because we can only reserve like 3 million. They can reserve up to like 10 if they wanted to. So it'd be nice to have it that way, as opposed to having, I don't even know if there's a legal way to go through and have them pay for some of our capital items. I don't think that's possible. But to just form a relationship with the town to say, hey, we're in a bind right now. We lost $1 million in state aid. Do you think you could make it up with allowing a little bit of flow over the dam into the taxpayers' pockets to make up with what we're hurting for at the state level? So
I was gonna say, Ken and I'll go to the town council
Well, there you
meeting.
go.
They love us there.
They love us. We can definitely try.
it would be a good conversation to
It would
have.
be a
not
good conversation just to say, we would really appreciate if we could do that. And, do we have 3 million in surplus? We don't
No.
have that. No. So is there any way that we could vote so we could keep a little bit so we would have that?
we retained 500,000 from surplus just in case.
Right.
So we really had 6.7. We retained 500,000 because now we have the ability to do such, and we gave back 6.2. So this is the decision we made. The superintendent and I made that call just in case. So if we want to do something,
Right. So I'm thinking, so then we would be able to offset so we have a year like this that it doesn't happen very often, but the total eclipse happens. And so we say, all right, we're going to take our own surplus and put it towards it.
we can't build it up. The town can accumulate. We can't accumulate.
But we can go up to 3 million, right?
We can go up to 3 million, or we can retain 3 million.
And we
but
have
at the end of the year, you have to
500,000.
give it back, but then you can retain it again.
Oh, okay.
It's a strange thing.
Okay,
where
so we don't really get to keep it very long.
No, you don't. This is one of the big issues when I started working for a school district 28 years ago from a town, where I could just say, we're keeping this, and we would hang on to it year to year. But there's different rules for schools, but there isn't. Because when you look at the RSAs, there's nothing that says we can't do exactly what the town does, and there's nothing that says that the town can do what it does. I had that argument with DRA like 30 years ago. Okay, I lost, obviously. So, we can retain a certain amount, but we can let that go at the end of the year.
So would this be something that maybe we need to talk to our state reps on? So maybe there could be
Maybe
a bill or something, in the future that schools would have more, especially in these times.
If it'd be a good idea, I think a first step to consult legal, to see what we could do in crafting some sort of piece of legislation that would make sense, and then run it past the folks at ASBO, Association of School Business Officials, and then run it past Barrett Christina School Boards Association to see if they'd get behind it. This isn't something that we can do like instantaneously, but I think for the long run, I think it's a really good idea.
Right, because in the past, when you could get state aid for building a new central office, then you could say to the voters, well, they're going to give us 40%, but now they're giving us
40%,
nothing.
nothing.
So, we really need a lot of momentum.
And just to be sure, I checked with Amy Clark up at the Bureau of School Approval. It says, Amy, can I get 40% for central office? She calls me up. She's laughing. She says, no, Matt, you can't do that. Okay, that's long gone. And I knew it, but I had to ask the question anyway. But we can't even get, if you were to build a new school, unless you're in a really high poverty district and your back is up against the wall and you've got caving, you got mold all over the place, you're getting nothing for building aid either. That program was a 35-year legacy program that went poof in 1 year. It just went away. And that was kind of sad as far as the state's support of buildings and infrastructure in the state of New Hampshire. This is Massachusetts. If you were in Webster, Massachusetts, one of my former superintendents became the superintendent in Westford, built himself a $100 million high school. The state picked up 80% up front of the costs because of the poverty level in that town. And Bill knows all about that because he would deal with them too, right? Yeah. So, questions?
Okay. Additional questions for Matt.
This is sort of follows on Lori's, and I know we've talked about it before, and I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is, but it's also not possible for us to have a line item in the budget that says we're going to save for something and then retain that money. Is that correct? Like, we can't have a fund that says, we're saving this money for roofs and we're going to put $100,000 in it every year or whatever.
It's called a capital reserve account. The only way you can put money into a capital reserve account is via a warrant article.
Okay.
The only way you could take money out of a capital reserve account would be by warrant article, unless you name the board to be agents to expend, which we do with the special ed fund. That's why if there's an emergency, the board is agents to expend. You don't have to go back to the voters. We have an emergency repair account, $500,000, that's sitting in there too. But the board is agents to expend. So Tom can say, the boiler at J. Muse just quit. It's going to be $400,000, which is that's a little on the cheap side. And I need the money from the reserve fund. And you would vote. We would hold a little public hearing right here, and it would get done. But to create those funds, you definitely need a warrant article.
And that wouldn't be something we would do this year, obviously,
No,
because
we're kind of stacked
we're
up on
looking
warrant
at a tough year.
Correct, yes.
Any other questions?
Well, can I go on to Amy?
Oh, certainly. Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
I just would like you to share with the community the continued expansions of our curriculum.
I'd be happy to. So in this budget, we've tried to, as through that vein of transparency, really looking at what do we need funds for and how have we used them in the past. And when Matt was talking earlier about curriculum and specifically professional development was sort of taken from all these different areas. And that's a challenge. The majority of the professional development funds, as Matt has also said, is captured in the CBA, and that's governed by our master plan and the professional development committee that Ken sits on and Jen has sat on it in the past. And you guys see how that works. The oversight really is not district initiatives. It really is teacher-driven professional development as per the CBA. The superintendent's office does have oversight over a small portion of that. And that's, at Bill's designee or discretion, and I knock on his door all the time. Hey, about this, can I send someone here? And then we also have a series, those of you that did negotiations, about the SLP or the stipend process that we have here that we've been working really hard to sort of make sense of. One of the questions that Naomi had was about the mentors. How do we pay for them? How have we paid for them in the past? And you'll see them as the stipends are a separate line item now. In the past, we have paid for our Torchbearer program, which is a Merrimack based and developed program that's very well known. We have a wonderful mentor program here for new teachers. That was primarily paid for the supplies and the training. In the past, and I can look back in our Title II, we have a district facilitator for the Torchbearer program, and then we have building facilitators for the Torchbearer, and those are paid for out of Title II. And so, we get some grant funds. We get about between $100,000 and $120,000 in Title II funds, and that goes to professional development, and about $20,000 of that goes towards these stipends and training for the torchbearers. But the mentors themselves are paid out of that SLP, which means that in any given year, a mentor, depending on the number of mentors or depending on the number of new teachers you have, the pool or the amount you get goes down. So you're doing the same amount of work, but you're not getting that. See, you're making the face that I make when I look at that SLP. It doesn't make sense. But there was a time when there wasn't a lot of turnover and you didn't have a lot of new teachers, so they would get a lot more money. They've gotten anywhere from $756, which is what they're getting now, up to $1,200, which is pretty usual and customary when you look at what other districts are paying for. If you've been a mentor, I know that you've been educators, I've been a mentor. It is a tremendous amount of work because you really want to include that person in the community and have them, have a worthwhile experience. The other thing that we're facing right now is that we, to Sarah's earlier point, we don't have the same level of applicants as we've had in the past. So often what's happening now is that folks are coming in with an interest in being a teacher and they have a statement of eligibility, but then they have to pursue an alternative pathway to licensure. And what the state requires is that you have a site-based mentor to do that. And I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but we're talking about why it's in the budget. We currently do not pay the mentors to support those folks. And the problem with that is that depending on the person, you may have, just an example, we have 21 folks that are pursuing an alternative licensure right now. Some of them are very specific licenses, say social studies. We do have, music. Special education is a K-12 license. It is very challenging to get through all of the developmental stages and all of the portions that license covers. I know that I have that license. You are eligible to support students from the age of 5 up until 22. So it's just different than a social studies license or a math license where you have a person who has a math degree and they come in, they know the content. They need help with how do you plan, how do you present, how do you classroom manage. That has been a real hurdle because we have those folks are on those site-based learning plans for up to 3 years. So that mentor has to serve in that capacity for 3 years. And we have had folks just say, I'm a torchbearer mentor and I'm happy to do that, but I'm not going to commit to this without some kind of compensation. So that's been a real struggle. So we're trying to figure out how to make that number be fair, looking at not just the torchbearer mentors, but also the alternative pathway to licensure mentors. And we need to make sure that those folks that are pursuing that licensure, not just like our new teachers, we want them to stay, we want them to be successful, and we want to set them up for success. And we have very strong teachers here that can help with that process, but they should be compensated for that. So that's what we're capturing in that part of the budget. One of the other questions that Naomi or others may have had is about iReady. You'll notice that amount that I put into the budget was about 130. The 130,000. Our most recent quote was about 124,000, and 22,000 of that is professional development that we may or may not need. So they've quoted that for us as our second year implementation, but we're not sure, what we will need. It'll be more on an as needed basis. We have really had a great partnership with Curriculum Associates, so we really feel confident that using the iReady diagnostic as well as the My Learning Path, at least for now, is the right move. I know Jason has already gone, but what I've often been doing with Jason when software comes up for renewal, he will say to me, do we still need this? Say, for example, IXL Math and ELA, we didn't have iReady last year when we renewed it. But this year, when it came up for renewal, we didn't renew it because we're using iReady. So as those opportunities pop up, we are looking at saying, yes, we're going to continue to do that, or no, we're not. One other area that we're looking for some funding, and I know Matt already spoke to it, is district initiative professional development. We don't have funding aside for this small amount, and we still have some real critical needs. You know that we offered a responsive classroom week-long workshop here last year. Those run about between $25,000 and $28,000 just to have the people come, just to have the facilitators from Responsive Classroom come, and then we do pay folks to attend. So we don't have any funding. Last year I funded it out of Title II, but we used all of our funds this year primarily for the New Hampshire Learning Initiative to do the competency work at the high school, and to continue to do some Wilson implementation for foundations and training our Title I tutors. So 100,000 seems like a lot of money, but it goes very, very quickly in this market. And then finally, we continue to have some curriculum needs, particularly in the area of social studies and health, and maybe foreign language. And one of the things that we're not able to do is purchase any pilot materials to be able to take a look at what might work. And sometimes you can get a rep that will give you something for free. Like we have a wonderful relationship with Savas. Tippy grew up here in Merrimack, and anytime I call her, she is extremely generous. Not all places are like that. So for example, when we wanted to do some piloting of Wit and Wisdom, I had to knock on Matt's door because I don't have any budget. I don't have any way to pay for it. And so we had to take from different lines just to be able to buy $3,000 worth of materials to pilot some things at the middle school. And to be able to choose the right thing, you have to be able to have funds. And so when we chose the number of 75,000, that can be more, it can be less. We were just looking at what are the needs, about how much does a pilot cost, what are the anticipated things, and, what have other pilots and things cost us. It would also be nice sometimes to be able to buy something when you see a need and to be able to fill it immediately. So for example, when we're looking at intervention programs, or, New Hampshire, we're still waiting for something social studies related to come out from the state, but we're hoping that some kind of New Hampshire history book besides this yellow book that came out in 2000. And it's a great book, but it's not current. So those were the needs, and those were the reasons that we put in some of those newer items. And this time next year, I think we'll be in a better position to say, did we need more? Did we need less? I know we will use the professional development money if the community supports that, just because we really need to provide high quality training to our staff to make a lot of the curriculum changes that we are presenting last year and this year.
I do have one question
Sure.
for you. In those future needs, now that the state requires graduates to have personal finance as a standalone class, is that going to be a future curriculum need that we need to maybe investigate new opportunities
Yes.
or curriculum for?
Yes. And I think right now the state it's integrated into our economics, as you know, but it's taking the same sort of pathway that civics and economics has, where, for this year you could have it integrated, but in the future it's going to have to be a standalone class. And some districts are already doing that. We do offer a class at the high school called Consumer Math. Not all students take it, but I have already talked to Department Chair Ron DeLude about whether this would be a math course. Is it going to be a business course? We have two very highly qualified business teachers. One of them is a CPA, a certified, certified public, no, what is it? CFA. Certified, yeah, the financial planner people. See, I'm not saying the right thing, but you know what I mean. So is it going to be a business class? Is it going to be a math class? Is it going to be a social studies class? So those are early discussions that we're having. But yes, we will need materials for that class, whether it's a personal finance, and we've had some samples come, but we'll need to purchase something.
So I think I said this last year, but having like a textbook rotation, like, so I know a lot of things are online today, but, so we don't have textbooks that are in year 2000. So like, like science, like having, the different disciplines rotate. Okay, now we're, social studies, do we need textbooks, and then have that rotation. So it's just streamlined.
And we've tried to do that. Mathematics, we replaced Envisions this year with the version that was aligned to the Common Core. I don't know why we were using that for so long, and hopefully that will make a difference. We did update Big Ideas as well. So K to 8, we are aligned now with newer textbooks. Last year we bought a biology textbook at the high school, and this year we're buying physical science. And I'm not sure whether we will purchase a chemistry textbook or not. We do have definitely some exciting developments related to the program of studies to share when that's appropriate. I'd like the new school counseling director and Principal Claire to come. She has just done an astronomical amount of work. I think you'll be really impressed with the program of studies and the changes that she's made. Right now, chemistry is an elective, as is physics, but we are making some shifts to have higher expectations for graduation requirements, especially we're moving from 2 credits, those incoming freshmen, it'll be 3 credits of science and 3 credits of social studies. So we're making some great changes there. And Kay's been in her position for 6 months and has done just a tremendous job.
And for New Hampshire scholars, you have to have physics or chemistry. So I think that's all really important for parents to know.
Yeah, and our chemistry, we have 2 full-time chemistry teachers who are phenomenal, well-licensed. Yes, they're
Perfect.
just great, Dr. Campbell and Mr. Mueller. And they teach chemistry all day long, which is not common in high schools. Physics, maybe not as much. We offer 4 sections of that, but we do offer the AP, which is impressive, and an honors class. And then, but we'll see, I think, with the additional requirement. We also have offered some exciting electives. I think you saw that last year. We have a food chemistry class and toxins in you that we've been trying to look at what students might be interested in and offer those courses.
I have a student in food chemistry who is loving it.
Yeah.
And that student is not usually a science-y student, but loving that class. So it's all very exciting.
Any other questions from Matt or Amy? All right. Well,
I
thank you
have
so much.
none. You answered all of them in your presentation.
Wow, look
Great.
at
Thanks,
that.
Naomi.
Okay, well, if there are no additional questions, we shall move on from the budget presentations and kind of wrap things up here, starting with old business. Board's response to the 24-23 capital improvement plan.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. We talked about this last time we had a board meeting. You see in 24-25, we're looking at a roof at J Muse. To continue with our roofing schedule, I passed out a map of the areas that are going to be done. They're off warranty in 2014 and 2007. You see some of the other areas that we have here with the newer roofs. They're warranted to 2063. That's not a typo. That's a true statement. So when we spend the money and do it the right way and get a good warranty off of these roofs, both in the installation and in the materials, it really kind of pays off. The window replacements at J Muse, Tom Tussaud talked about that. He talked about using duct tape, so it's in the CIP. Jason's technology infrastructure improvement. I shouldn't say Jason, the head of library technology, library services, for $1,236,000 is in there. The split systems, I believe, instead of 212, that should say 200,000. To align with what Tom had in his budget. The locker rooms, those locker rooms we have at the high school, we have had some conversations with the teachers there, and we do want to, at some point in time, take a look at them and see if we can do some sort of refurbishment to them. Maybe as far as ventilation goes, maybe as far as maybe reorganization. But that was put in this year. It could have been pushed out a few years. but just to kind of get the ball rolling and come up with some ideas. Then we have the safety security. We have cameras and lock sets. And those aren't in Tom's budget because I got the Safe School grants. I'm still waiting for the official word to come down, but I got the official word from the Bureau of School Approval. I guess I'm just waiting for a committee of, politicians to say, yes, it's good. So I'm waiting to show up in the grants management system. And I just want to, thank Tom Tussaud for this, for facilitating with Mike Dumais the inventory of every single lock and bolt and whatever in this entire school district. They came up with a sheet of per classroom doorknobs and locks that should be replaced. It was all put in a spreadsheet. We went out and we got pricing on it, and that's what it came in at. And it's going to be big increase to our safety and security of our buildings, just to make sure we're up to date with all our hardware. You heard the gentleman from the Tomahawk Butchery Tavern, whatever it is. I have to go down there.
It's so good.
My wife doesn't eat meat, so she's gonna sit in the car while I eat meat, and then I'm gonna have to brush my teeth before I come out.
It's so
Only
good.
kidding.
It's so good.
I know
Yeah.
it's so good. I'm dying to go in there. So he mentioned around $200,000 for the sign. I know Sean Powers from Integra Systems. It used to be Remove the Mystery. He's a local he's in town. He was instrumental in the along with Dr. Bob Wolf and working with him to get the concession stand at the high school done. And Sean is working with this gentleman also who came before us to kind of gave a little pep talk as far as fundraising. They want to get this done, and I'm excited about it, And maybe we could have the board's picture on the Jumbotron at some point in time. Maybe
Just
you're
your
looking
picture.
at me. Maybe we
Just
could have
your picture, Matt.
Just my picture. No, Amy's picture. Yes. And then, huh? I do like football. You do like football? Okay. You're a Pittsburgh fan, though. I know you are. I won't hold that against you. Anyway. And then we have the, the SAU office. We have that TBD, but from what I understand and listening to the resolve of the board, that will be a warrant article. So I'll be putting that together. I've already acquired the services of an attorney from Divine Millamette and Branch to be our bond counsel, because you got to get a lawyer to do this, So it's something that'll be forthcoming, and we'll bake that into the warrant article that we'll be talking about in the next few meetings. I forget which one it is. And we'll also put a placeholder in there for the Mesa warrant article also to see where that's going to come out. And we'll also put a placeholder in there for the roof. So that's essentially what we're looking at for warrant articles. And at that point in time, you can discuss them. You can, talk about whatever you want to do and vote them up, vote them down, just vote, So this is the capital improvement plan. The budget committee asked for a copy of this right before we came to this meeting, so they have a copy of it. And I don't know if they're going to be discussing it at the next meeting that we have tomorrow, which I don't have my little cheat sheet here, but I forget who goes tomorrow. But we have a meeting with the budget committee tomorrow.
Essentially the same group except maintenance with library, technology, and student
Yeah.
services tomorrow.
So now we have people out 2 nights a week back to back, and this is going to continue the week after and the week after and the week after because of their scheduling. So we're being accommodating, and we want to get through the budget committee, and we want to give them a good presentation. So usually in the past, but because of the short time crunch, we would finish with it. The board would give its final rendition. We would have a cut list, and then we would go to the budget committee. We're not doing it that way this year. So we're doing a little bit here, a little bit with them, a little bit here, a little bit with them, and we'll still get to the same point in the end. So it doesn't really matter what the method is, and we'll present this to them if you approve it tonight.
So first of all, I want to say that I know the Planning and Building Committee does spend a lot of time with Matt on the capital improvement plan. and they have a lot of questions, and they do really like a deep dive into what is needed, when it's needed, what is the timeline. So I just want to say I appreciate that. I also appreciate, Matt and the work that he does for the board. There is a member of the Planning and Building Committee, Shane Albuquerque, who is actually a Merrimack High School graduate, former student of mine, and he has volunteered to make a donation so we can have positive signs for the voters, that we can say yes on the warrant article. So the board and, our new ad hoc committee can take signs, budget committee members, if they want to take signs to support the new central office. I think that would be really helpful for voters to see and gain momentum for that cause.
Great. So we're taking a vote on this tonight, capital improvement plan? All right.
If you please.
I have one quick question. I'm just basically going to sum up what you just said to make sure I'm understanding it. But so the window replacement, the technology infrastructure, and the HVAC systems are the things that are on this list that are already in the budget request
Correct.
that you sent to us, right?
Yes,
The cameras and the lock sets are not because they're going to be funded by a grant.
correct,
And then the school board's campus signage is not at this point
correct,
anywhere.
Mhm.
And then the roofing is also not anywhere.
correct.
Thank you.
Great. So do we have a motion to accept the capital improvement plan as submitted?
I will make a motion to accept the capital improvement plan as submitted.
We have a second. Second. All those in favor? Aye. 500. All those opposed, abstentions, et cetera, et cetera. It passes.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to approval of minutes, public minutes for December 11th, 2023. Do we have a motion to accept?
I move that we accept the minutes from the public and non-public meetings of December 11th.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained. 500. Consent agenda. We have some educator nominations tonight.
We do. We have 2 nominations for you to consider. First is Jocelyn O'Connor, who is currently a paraprofessional at Merrimack Middle School, and she is going to become a special education teacher there. And second is Dr. Jennifer Gonzalez, who will join the science department at Merrimack High School, and she is replacing Joe Sanborn, who has replaced Adam French, and Adam French is the new athletic director. So that sort of domino effect. But Dr. Gonzalez comes to us from Dartmouth, where she was recently doing some research as a botanist,
Yeah.
and she's going to be joining the team there. So.
Yeah, impressive resume. Sure. Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda for educator nominations? Motion.
And I'll second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
500.
And I just want to say how excited I am that we have a paraprofessional who worked in our school district, who continued to get their degree in special ed, and now is going to be a special. How exciting. This is what we've been talking about for a long time.
And she's an impressive candidate. I think Principal Bozeman and Assistant Principal Hubbard, they're really excited to have her come on board.
That's great. All right, moving on to public comments on agenda items. If you'd like to speak on any of the items that were discussed tonight, you're welcome to come to the mic. Just state your name and address for the record. And if you're a student, just your name. The mic is open.
Chuck Mower, 4 Depot Street. I would be remiss if I did not lament your inability to see the financial advantage of capital reserve planning. And I can leave that at that. And I would also like to, as the Vice President of the Historical Society, tell you that we are having a program on the 16th of January, which is open to the public. And our speaker is Sue Feineman, who is an expert and an authority on one-room schoolhouses. And I think you might find it very interesting how we once had district support of, there's 13 districts support of one-room schools in Merrimack. And of course, over the years, we saw centralization of education come into effect, and that's why we lost our little one-room schoolhouses. But it's a very profound and interesting look at how education has developed and the importance to support it, all through a lecture on one-room schools, of which the district has the ability to see 2 of them. One they own, which is actually a two-room school in Schoolhouse number 3 on Depot Street in Reeds Ferry, and of course, Schoolhouse number 12 on Boston Post Road. So please see if you can find the time to attend.
All right. And then we will close public comment on agenda items for tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion. We have a second from Lori. All those in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week for round 3.